Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Patch Management Best Practices for Protecting Your Customers. I'm Amber Noble, a marketing specialist at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. Today, I'm joined by Ken Bartlett, Solutions Engineer Manager here at Barracuda MSP. With more than 10 years experience in the IT field, he possesses incredible insight into both the hardware and software side of business. During today's educational webinar, Ken will walk us through the growing complexity of patch management and how to overcome common challenges. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to share them using the questions or chat panel to the right of the Zoom webinar screen. Throughout the webinar, there will be survey questions. Please take part. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will also be prompted to complete a brief polling survey for feedback. Please take a moment to engage with us and tell us what you think so we can continually improve the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Ken to begin today's presentation. Take it away, Ken.
Thanks, Amber, and thank you everyone for joining today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days. Today we're going to be talking about cybercrime and how the landscapes have shifted from a cybersecurity standpoint. Obviously at Barracuda, specifically Barracuda MSP, we make and support products that are designed to offer managed service providers secure solutions, security software, security firewalls, security management tools to manage your customers' network and provide the best in breed for those customers. Crime has changed as a whole. Physical break-ins and enters have declined exponentially. It's much easier and more appealing to steal information digitally. There are toolkits that are very inexpensive. They offer a wide range of threats to bypass, typical underprotected digital assets and information. So this is a major shift that we're seeing over the last, 2, 3, 5, 10 years globally. So this is a massive change across the globe. Data has morphed into the world's most valuable asset, even beyond oil. This shift in conjunction with the complexities of enforcement on a global scale has made cybercrime very appealing and just a massive industry. Everyone is vulnerable, businesses that are small and large, and of course, right down to the end consumers, your customers. When we look at the largest data breaches, such as the Cambridge Analytica scandal or the Facebook scandal, Marriott Hotels, these are very high-profile, massive breaches which allowed for advanced profiling and trade analysis, along with complete personal information breaches, even details like passport numbers for hundreds of millions of people. So you can see the devastating effect that has when those sort of breaches make the headlines. Personal data is valuable on its own. However, when you combine it with multiple data points on those same individuals and present it in an organized fashion, it becomes extremely valuable. Compromised data and personal info is often sold to the highest bidder or combined into curated data sets. Information is power, and by acquiring these highly organized data sets along with data points, everything from personal preferences to intimate digital details, cyber criminals are able to, they're equipped to launch very sophisticated, highly targeted attacks to sway results or improve success rates over traditional random attacks. And this is an important distinction. I wanted to talk about some relevance here. Everyone's heard of WannaCry, WannaCrypt. This was the headline ransomware that had a massive impact. It's the most well-known ransomware. It was an exploit that began as a network vulnerability in unpatched Windows Server systems. Of course, there was a patch released, but it targeted unpatched systems. It was the combination of two so-called NSA tools, Double Pulsar and Eternal Blue. They were believed to have developed in North Korea, but the most alarming component here is within 24 hours, this WannaCry threat infected 230,000 Windows PCs. It was eventually put to rest by a UK security researcher who was able to identify a kill switch in the code and stop that initial propagation. Another one I want to mention is the Equifax. This is a breach that is particularly relevant here because of the third-party nature of it. The Equifax breach sort of centered around an application called Apache Struts. This is a web framework application builder tool, and it's widely used. Many Fortune 100 companies utilize this framework, and a vulnerability was exposed. A patch was released, but it was not installed on their systems. As a result, 147 million users' data was leaked, resulting in something like a $500 to $700 million settlement for that specific case. So again, just a massive breach as a result of an unpatched third-party application. Another one I wanted to mention here, Maersk. They're the world's largest shipping and global logistics company. They experienced a very widespread cyber attack. Maersk has something like 80,000 employees, so a giant company. These were extremely advanced tools that were combined into one tool called NotPetya. Eternal Blue, which was one previously mentioned, and another tool which was called Mimikatz for finding cached passwords on Windows machines. The bottom line with this sort of setup is they were able to identify and infect computers that weren't patched, and then from there, use the behavior of Mimikatz to actually compromise computers that were already patched. So double damage in that specific example. And lastly, the city of Atlanta, sort of a more regional example. And you know, when you're speaking with your partners, your end customers, the decision makers, the stakeholders, we encourage you to find and dig up and reference local examples. They resonate a lot more than some of these big headline items. Again, everyone is vulnerable to these type of threats, whether it's ransomware or third-party vulnerabilities. The city of Atlanta, they were targeted and often actually criticized for their IT networks being neglected and mismanaged, and some of the workers actually became sort of complacent. And that's when things really start to fall apart, where password policies aren't being met, best practices aren't being followed. What happened there is they were able to actually brute force attack the network and were able to penetrate the network and get in. From there, things like Wi-Fi at the airport went down, social services was impacted. Again, it took a huge amount of effort to clean it up. It was originally estimated at $2.5 million, but it took more like $10 million in the end to clean that up. So a pretty embarrassing situation there for the city of Atlanta. All right, so moving along, just sort of some foreshadowing here of what we're looking to. By the end of 2021, there will be a ransomware attack on a business every 11 seconds. You know, certainly that's a scary component. This is scary in itself, but what's even more alarming is the ramp up to that. So prior to that, if we look at 2019, the previous measure was $11.5 billion. So if we look at roughly $20 billion in damages due by 2021, 2 years prior to that, it's roughly half of that figure. And if we go back to 2017, it's actually $5 billion. And then if we go to 2015, it's just $325 million. So you're talking about exponential growth there. This is according to Cybersecurity Ventures. And this, again, this is just the monetary value. So you can really take into consideration the intangibles. So, for example, what does it cost the reputation? What does it cost this is just the recovery cost. So there's really a whole broad spectrum of impact and cost associated with these attacks that's not covered in these headline values or recovery costs. If you're a target and you get compromised, say you're a retail outlet just before the holidays, how much revenue was lost in sales because your business was down? How many people were no longer able to shop or transact with you because they're concerned about their personal information moving forward? Those are very difficult figures to put a number on, but they're absolutely real world figures that impact victims of these threats. Something to note here, of course, security is a multi-layered approach. Patching is absolutely critical in that security layer. If we will just want to emphasize that, we also want to get your feedback here. So thank you in advance for your participation. We're going to generate a poll here on screen, so I'll give you a few minutes to follow that. The poll will be, what level of software patch and update management? So I'll just give you 10 or 15 seconds to respond to that poll. Thank you again. Okay, the results are in. Thank you again for your participation there in that poll. As we know, delivering patch management has its challenges. It's not something that everyone is into. It's not something that is easy, and there's a good reason for that. It's complex. It has potential fallouts. The value can be hard to sell to clients who haven't been compromised and aren't aware of the risks. So there's a lot of concerns there. We're going to do another poll questionnaire to get some more information. Again, we appreciate this feedback and your participation. This one, have you encountered any challenges provided? I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to respond. Again, thank you for your participation. Okay, thank you again for your votes there on the poll question. So some of the challenges with third party, these are the common challenges that we hear from our MSP partners. We don't know which devices have outdated software, understandable. Figuring out where the outdated versions live on the networks, that's a very time-consuming task. Do you run software asset inventory reports on all the systems of the site and then manually parse through them? Do you identify or allocate a resource to go through and identify those machines and highlight them and then schedule them for a maintenance window? Second, what are the latest patches and updates available by the vendor? So do you go to each vendor's website and check? How do you find that? Do you use a tool? What are you using to identify those? Again, very time consuming. And lastly, when was the last patch deployed and was it successful? So providing some audit and accountability on whether or not those third-party patches are going through. Certainly a very common trait from what we talk to our MSP partners when we poll them about the challenges of third-party patching. So some of the best practices that come from Barracuda with regards to patch management, I wanted to share them with you. There's 5 or 6 slides here. Number one, knowing your customer's environment. So when you're onboarding your customers, it's about understanding their network, looking for single points of failure, identifying concerns, making recommendations. So obviously, there's an opportunity there for upsell and converting them to more reliable, more robust, more secure hardware and software. But getting a good understanding of the software and the hardware is critical for your patch management process. Having a clear picture will allow you to know what vulnerabilities may exist and which patches and updates you need to look out for. So you cannot underestimate the time spent understanding your customers' environments and knowing them inside and out. This saves you, whether it be troubleshooting, documentation, speccing out projects, but also providing security on a day-to-day basis. Understanding their risk tolerance. This is another big point that we see partners working with and seeing the value with as they mature and grow into a larger MSP or maybe an MSSP. Understanding the risk tolerance level for your customer systems is critical. While all systems should be patched and updated, you should know which systems are critical and ensure those are patched and updated in advance or first. For instance, an offline or an air-gapped server in a network that's not internet accessible should be less critical than a laptop that's used on the road, which is more likely to be exposed and maybe has more user input or user variables, accessing websites, etc. So making that critical device a priority to patch. Again, that's just playing into the scenario of understanding the risk tolerance of your customers. Consolidating software vendors, another big one. Making recommendations to consolidate software. the more versions of a piece of software is used, the higher the risk of exposure. It also creates a larger number of administrative overhead tasks. Choose one version and try to stick to that. Make recommendations like Windows OS. Stick to a specific version of that OS as opposed to using 3 different varieties of desktop OSs and worrying about having to use tools that successfully and accurately patch manage each and every one of those. While it's not always easy to migrate customers to another software, it's always good practice to consolidate and standardize software so that you can keep up with patches and updates and become experts with those applications, whether you're talking about standardizing a security offering for a customer or standardizing their user experience, but also supporting them. That has a lot to do with coming up with, being an expert and coming up with standard solutions. Vendor patch management announcements. This is a big one. Understanding or subscribing to these patch management announcements. And this type kind of plays into vulnerability announcements as well, but once you have an inventory of the software your customers use, you need to be alert for those vendors' patch announcements. So many commonly used software are following Microsoft's best practices of issuing patches and updates on a specific date or a specific day of the month. Subscribing to these announcements to know when new patches are available is an important step. At the same time, subscribing to Outbreak or something like the CVE database where you're going to get vulnerability notices. This type of announcements and update channels are very important as a security provider to be aware of the landscape and these threats that are feeding the information to counter these threats. So absolutely critical to dial into those announcements and those vendor updates. And here we have reducing the vulnerability footprint. So sometimes patches can't be applied right away. There's dozens of variables that impact that. It may have a conflict with another software. You can try to mitigate the risk of a device by locking down permissions to these devices. Again, hitting on the layered approach, only providing permissions and access to what the users need and nothing more. Finding a way to reduce the exposure of the unpatched devices to the internet, for example, restricting the ability for the end user to install applications or get to devices that they should not have access to. Again, hardening a network in that manner is not something that a lot of MSPs necessarily make a priority of it. We see a lot of security-focused MSPs putting this more at the forefront. It can be difficult to bill for such a service, but it's important to understand and emphasize to your customers the risk associated with not auditing the network, providing security site assessments, and getting visibility into the deep corners of that infrastructure and that network to find these type of vulnerable areas. So certainly reducing that footprint is a critical component. And lastly, document. So document. Whether you're planning on deploying patches using automated tools or manually, it's always best to document your patch management process. This allows you to share it, to cross-train staff, to audit it internally, but also to make sure your customer is aware for internal training purposes, but also showing value in that. So providing documentation, coming up with a solid documentation system for tracking these, making changes to it, auditing, etc. This is a critical component here. So to sum it up, overcoming those challenges. Some recommendations that we make to our partners, and these are partners who are using any one of Barracuda MSP's products. We recommend they use a remote monitoring and management tool. We recommend that they use a patch management tool that gives you visibility on all software patches and updates for all commonly used software. And lastly, the third one, automate. Detect, acquire, test, deploy, and report. Come up with a system, a process for your business to service your customers at a higher standard. Take advantage of the capabilities of the tools that are available to you to streamline your processes and provide that higher level of service. Again, just to recap, know your customers' environments, understand their risk tolerance, consolidate software vendors, subscribe to vendor patch and update announcements, reduce the vulnerability footprint, and lastly, document the best practices. How can Barracuda MSP help? Fantastic question. We have these principles that we offer. These are sort of something that we keep in the front of our mind, whether we're talking about enhancing a product, delivering, whether we're talking about delivering a new product, enhancing a product, making changes, or partnering with another product. Where anytime we get the minds together, we come up and we strive to help our partners create rich service offerings, deliver them easily and profitably. Simple administration, simple licensing, and be able to demonstrate those, which is very critical as far as showing the value that you're delivering to your end customers. So certainly that's something that we keep at the forefront whenever we're trying to enhance the products or deliver new products here at Barracuda MSP. This is the Managed Workplace sort of introduction. We call it Barracuda Managed Workplace. It's an RMM, a security-centric remote monitoring and management tool. It's the first RMM to include a built-in site security assessment that enables MSPs to quickly assess the security of your customers' networks, deliver a multi-layered security service, and monitor it for anomalies and seamlessly recover data in the event of an attack. Additionally, we offer advanced software management through Managed Workplace. This is an automated third-party patch and software update management feature. It has access to thousands of software versions from 100+ different vendors. And you can update managed devices directly within the RMM platform. We call Managed Workplace a security-centric RMM platform, a focus on Windows patching, patching third-party applications through the advanced software management, a site security assessment, full visibility on the network. It really is a security-centric tool. This is what the advanced software management overview looks like within the tool. The overview page gives me a summary of patches that are approved for installation, so the number of patches. I can see patches that are pending approval or not approved or declined. And all these are hyperlinks, so I can click into how many patches are needed and see what's required, or the number of computers needing patches, etc. So full control and visibility. Of course, we have a slew of reports that go along which show this type of information in greater detail. In the UI, this is what the approval looks like, where I can see individual patches for each. I can click into one of these patches and get visibility on the URL, the version, the release notes, previous versions, etc., along with the release date and the status, whether it's approved or not approved. Again, thousands of versions, over 100 different software vendors for the advanced software management inside of Managed Workplace, our security-centric remote monitoring and management tool. The advanced software management is one of 3 operational accelerators. And the other 2, of course, are the NOC, the Network Operations Center, and the Help Desk. And these are white label brandable services that operate on your behalf. They make it easy to scale up your business as your customer base grows without having to hire full-time employees and train them yourself and deal with all of that. We can act on your behalf, respond to alerts, action alerts, and even interface with your customers through the Help Desk component. There's various level of services through these accelerators that are available. So you can really tailor the solution to fill in the voids in your service offering to offer a very security-focused solution to your customers without necessarily having to hire specialists for each area. The benefit of the advanced software management component inside of Managed Workplace: unified patch management and software management, consolidating the interface that you have for managing Windows updates and third-party patching, along with supporting all of the commonly used applications. Again, thousands of versions, hundreds of different 100+ different vendors. It allows you to offer that solution with a minimal amount of clerical overhead on your end. It enforces the best practices as far as setting up test groups for patching, regular patching, auto approval of certain classifications to ensure that those systems are up to date, customization of patch policies. So if you have clients that have a one-off schedule that needs to be done or have specific requirements, you can deviate them from the specific, your regular service interval from a patching perspective. And then, of course, that's centralized management. This is critical as far as having everything under one hood, knowing where to go to find the tools and access the systems and provide a security-focused approach to your customers, your customers and your service delivery model. Thank you again, folks. If you have any questions, we'll get through as many as we can live today. Please feel free to enter them in the chat, or you can reach out to sales@barracudamsp.com. On the screen there, 1-800-569-0155, sales@barracudamsp.com or barracudamsp.com/RMM. We appreciate you joining in. Thank you all again.